Hello and welcome back to Dungeons & Dragons Basics, from Dice to Roleplay. In the last episode, we talked about our statistics and how that affects our game a little bit. Going from that, we're going to start talking about skill checks, which are the things that you're going to be rolling and using your statistics for the most. We kind of touched on that the last time we talked, but this time we're going to go a little bit more in depth. So, what are skills? Skills are things that a character can do while playing Dungeons & Dragons. They represent the non-weapon, non-magical checks that a player may have to do as the game progresses, and each skill is attached to one of these stats that we talked about last episode. Tasks performed outside of combat may be subject to a skill check from the DM, and then players roll a d20 to determine if they succeed in that action. So, for instance, if you're trying to sneak up on somebody and you need to roll stealth, you might have to roll a skill check to see if you're stealthy enough to sneak up on that person. If you need to move something in town to help out, make some money, you'd have to roll a strength check. All these different things that you want to try to do involve your stats and your skills, and the DM gets to decide which skill you use and what the passing level is. So, for instance, right, rolling that boulder or trying to move that boulder, you'd have to roll, a strength check. And he might say, okay, this is a pretty big boulder, so this is a DC 15 strength check. That means you have to roll a 15 or higher to move that boulder. Skill checks are always completed with the D20, and the DM should usually give you a goal, like I said, which is called a DC. For example, if your character is in a store and is browsing for weapons, the DM might ask you for an insight check. The player would then roll a D20 and then add their insight modifier. The DM will then give you information about the store based on your roll. For instance, if you roll only a 5, you might just get very generic information. This is a store full of swords. Cool. If you roll a 20 or over, you might be like, aha, this sword here is special, and here's why. So you're going to learn more the higher you roll in that instance. Proficiency in these skills comes with your class and your feats and your abilities, which gives you help on these ability checks. For instance, a rogue, which is a different class, might have a feat that makes them proficient in stealth, or a barbarian might make you better at athletics, because barbarians are all about strength, whereas being a rogue is all about being stealthy and, assassinating. Proficiency bonuses add to your rolls for that particular skill. So here's how that would work with a stealth roll of DC 15. If you roll on the dice, you get a 10, your dexterity mod is a +1, but you have a proficiency bonus, you would get a 13. However, that would be a fail. If you roll a 14 instead, you would end up with a 16 and pass. So that's how these proficiency bonuses work. If you're a rogue and you have that proficiency bonus, you're going to get a higher roll. If you are a barbarian doing this, who might not have the proficiency bonus in stealth, you'd have to erase that 2 here, and you just get 10 plus 1, which is 11, or 14 plus 1. In that case, you'd still pass. I did my math wrong here. That's a 17. Regardless. Point being, right, proficiency bonuses help you in certain skills. There's also the deal of advantage or disadvantage. Sometimes based on the situation or a status condition, you might have to roll with advantage or disadvantage. When you roll with advantage, you're rolling 2d20 and you get to take the better number. If you roll with disadvantage, you have to roll 2 dice, but you take the lower number. Advantage and disadvantage can be set by the DM for rolls, but it could also be imposed by enemy, ally, abilities, feats, or spells. So, for instance, there are certain abilities that make it so you can roll for advantage on certain tasks. There's abilities like paralysis or whatever that make it so you roll for disadvantage. There's all sorts of different things. Also, depending on the situation, the DM might decide, hey, you're going to roll at disadvantage for this because you're doing something super bizarre, right? You're trying to be stealthy, but you're wearing full plate mail. You're going to be really loud and clanky walking around. You get advantage on this because you did something really cool, and I like your idea, so I'm going to let you roll 2 dice. Those are all set by the DM. Of course, there are certain instances where you have to based on the rules, but advantage or disadvantage can mostly be set by the DM. Now, let's say you have an ability that gives you advantage, and you have a situation that would give you disadvantage. When an advantage and a disadvantage happen together, they cancel out and you get to roll just the 1 die, which is pretty sweet. You cannot stack advantage or disadvantage. So you can't have double disadvantage or double advantage. You can't roll 3 or 4 or 5 dice. It's always just 2 take the higher, 2 take the lower, or they cancel out and they become neutral. That's all we've got for skill checks. Next time, we'll learn even more about Dungeons & Dragons, and I'm excited to learn more with you. Thanks again, and we'll see you soon.